problems because they are indigos and because science does not understand that this is a genetic issue. It's not just an orientation of consciousness, it's a genetic issue. They are mistreating them. They are putting them on Ritalin and not using the techniques that would actually help these children. So the indigo children are a neat phenomena that's just beginning to emerge into kind of common slang in the psychological modes. There are people in the psychology areas that are becoming aware that there are these special children that are emerging, that some of them are genius level, some of them are they just stand out. Some of them are very psychic, which is another part of their abilities you don't hear too much about right now in the public forum. Some of them are very telepathic. Some of them astral project by the time they're 4 and remember and come back and tell you. They have advanced psychic abilities. They have potential abilities that make things like the government very nervous, because some of them are literally pyrokinetic, which means if they get angry, they can blow up your house by accident. All right? These children are a phenomena that the more common ones that aren't blowing things up by accident and that kind of stuff, that are just exhibiting advanced characteristics in certain ways or ADD type symptoms, they're not considered a threat yet. But the ones that are considered a threat, they disappear very quickly. What most people have no idea is going on here. There are organizations set up in a number of countries already that if these children are identified by certain characteristics that you can sometimes see at birth, there's a couple reasons they're called indigos. One is some of them actually come in looking blue, and it's not because they have a heart problem. They come in with a blue tint to their skin that by about 3 months fades into a normal skin coloring. This is genetic again. Blue babies start to come out, they tend to disappear. They tend to get death certificates when they're not dead. Their mothers tend to think they died because there is government intervention going on with these children. It's not on the level of government that most people that work in the government know about. This is more of that beyond top security type stuff. There are things going on in this world that we are just not permitted to have information on. And the indigos, and understanding who they are, is key to understanding what's really going on in the big picture here. With the indigo children, the ones we need to pay attention to most right now are the ones that are bringing themselves into our attention. You're having children going around and shooting children in schoolyards these days. You're having children killing parents. You're having children, more and more and more children, being put on Ritalin because they don't cooperate in the school systems, and there's this whole system set up. Certain behaviors in the classroom, that gets sent to the counselor. The parent is advised to send the child to a psychologist. The psychologist is advised to use Ritalin and those kind of drugs to help the child adjust better. There's a railroading going on with the indigo children. Detrimental to them, but if it's detrimental to them, it's going to be detrimental to society eventually, because when indigos, the energy in their system backs up, they can become violent. They can lose it completely. They're dealing with levels of energy and levels of consciousness coming into those little bodies that most of us never have to worry about, and psychology knows nothing about unless they understand the multidimensional structure of human identity, which unfortunately isn't the common model that's used in psychology right now. It's a model that indigos will need even to understand themselves. So in this presentation, we're going to get into primarily understanding who the indigo children are. Before we can help them, we need to realize how different they are from the average person, because they are quite different. And then we can start to explore what needs to be done in this society to accommodate these children, because whether or not we like it, they are here. And whether or not we want to admit they are what they are, they still are what they are. Once we can identify what that is, we can assist them with their problems. We can also discover if we might be one. Because indigos didn't just start coming in. They've been coming in little dribs and drabs for about 200 years. It's part of an evolutionary advancement program that we're going to talk about. Some people in this room, possibly many, are actually indigo genetic coded people. And you'll have certain experiences if you were. One of them is probably having a very difficult time being so sensitive as you grew up, because you have an awareness and a frequency in your consciousness that when you walk around in public schools and deal with the world the way it is out there, there's a part of you that just knows what is wrong with this picture, that you don't fit in. You feel there's a part of you that knows better than this, and even though you can't pull it in fully, this is what indigos are dealing with. They want to be a part of things, but things aren't supposed to be this way. They have a supposed to concept. They have something to compare it to because they have at least an intuitive memory of how things were and are in places where they work right, in systems that aren't structured like our psychological, our government systems, our socioeconomic systems. This is not a healthy world. This is a very sick world right now, and it's so sick that we've been living under mind control to believe it's okay, to believe this is a well world. It is not, and it's because of the ideas we use to build this world. We're taught to accept it because this is the way things are, and the way things are the way the experts tell us, whoever they are, and we teach our children the same thing, and as long as we comply and follow the rules, we have a nice little life that ends in death. Death and pay taxes. That's the only thing you really have to worry about. When indigos come in, they know this is not the way the universe works. It's an intuitive sense. They can't put words on it. But there's a rebellion that happens in them. And if that rebellion isn't addressed and respected for the fact that they're right, it can backfire. And they can become a real force to contend with, particularly the pyrokinetics that they have locked up in government facilities because they don't know what to do with them. They don't know what to do with children who can accidentally start fires when you get them upset. And you know what? The children who have that problem don't know what to do with themselves. It's scary for them because they don't have their full awareness yet as who they are, why they came in. They just know they don't fit and they can do some things that other people can't, and what's wrong with me? The indigo's children tend to end up feeling there's something wrong with them because they haven't fully awakened yet to remember who they are, why they came. And society will tell them, you're different. There's something wrong with you. You're not normal. And they try to suppress their qualities to make them normal, and that doesn't work either. So I'm going to flip. We're going to explore a bit. Let's see. Okay, we can go past that one. We're going to explore the gene code, first of all. And to explore the gene code, I'm going to do a quick recap. Okay, you can just move through those kind of fast, until we get to charts and graphs and things. We're going to do a real quick recap on understanding relationships between dimensions, DNA, and consciousness. Because if you don't understand how these things fit together, you will not understand what an indigo is compared to a non-indigo. And you will not understand what indigos need to have done to help them. So do a real quick recap on, now, dimensions. When we talk about dimensions in the paradigm that most of you are from, have been in other workshops, so I don't have to go from kindergarten back up to here, which is good, saves time. Dimensions, they're interwoven layers of scalar waves. We have a definition for dimensions. Well, if you notice, with science, it's more of a word that's used to describe attributes of something, but it is not considered a something. It's not a noun. In our vocabulary, a dimension is a noun. It's describing a scalar field, a specific thing that has specific characteristics. So we have a model of reality that if you don't understand the interdimensional model, you will not understand who an indigo is and why it's important that they're here. So I want to show you where the dimensional structures and those paradigms fit with the whole indigo issue. Now, we have the dimensions or interwoven layers of scalar waves. This is all in there. It's like a refresher in the book, so anybody that didn't get pieces of it, you see where they all fit. Scalar waves are points of standing waves composed of literally units of consciousness that flash on and off. Particle units, particle, particle, particum. There's a whole science behind this. So I'm not just winging it off the top of my head, talking about vague stuff. I know what I'm talking about when I talk about this dimensional structure, whether science wants to agree with me or not. And right now, I don't have time to prove it to them. If I had 25 years to walk them through step by step and learn their terminology to plug it into mine, they'd be blown away. I don't have time, because right now, we have issues happening that we need to learn how to use energy quickly. And it's only the people who are beyond the point, well, prove it to me, who sense that, okay, teach me something. I'll learn and I'll work on the proof later. They're the people I speak to, because they're the ones that will make a difference here, while the scientists are still scratching their heads trying to figure out why there's solar changes happening that they haven't predicted and don't understand why they're happening. There are things happening here the scientists don't know yet. They don't know why. They're seeing, observing symptoms. They're observing indigos. They're observing solar changes. They don't know what is happening. Somebody needs to get a group of people together that has some idea of what's happening so we can make it work in a way that's healthy for our race. All right, when we get into dimensions and scalar waves, I like this because it helps bring it all together. Cyclic repeating patterns of flash line sequences form frequency bands. A dimension is one full frequency band. Now, frequency band is a term we've heard of here. Okay? Science talks about frequencies. If we can understand it one step deeper than that a frequency band is a repeating pattern of what's called flash line sequences. flashing on and off of stationary, fixed, standing wave patterns, scalar waves. This is where frequency comes from. It's not just an observable symptom of something unidentifiable called the universe and its energy mechanics. Frequency is repeating patterns of flash line sequences that happen because of units of consciousness, part of K, part of Chi, part of Cum, firing at certain specific rhythms on and off to each other. They are internal fission and fusion generators. In fusion, particle, antiparticle come together, creates an immediate reciprocal fission or replication. So it's a continual, perpetual motion universe we live in. And science hasn't been able to figure out how to identify this yet. It all comes down to scalar wave technology and understanding what scalar waves are, how they're literally forms of consciousness, and how everything is composed of consciousness. So it's a dimensional model that, give them about 50 years, and the right people, probably indigos, coming in to take the science jargon now and make it grow to where it can fit these concepts. These are our ways to take words like, muons, electrons, photons, and plug it into this model. They fit. But we're starting at the deep level, the morphogenetic level, the template of light, sound, and consciousness that everything else is built on. We'll work up to where all those other pieces that they've identified fit. So it's a model that, it is the model that's used in the future actively. We are being visited by beings from the future, whether we want to admit it or not, because they understand this model. Why can't we visit them? Because we don't understand this model. If science could open to that concept, they would start to realize, wow, we could learn something here, So I don't have time to argue with people who are saying, yeah, but, prove this, prove that. So here's the information. Take what you know. You go prove it to yourself. And I can teach you some abilities to open to your higher consciousness, so maybe it can guide you, but they don't want to know about this. So it's like people like this that are willing to say, okay, I'll learn something new. I'm open to learning. I would not doubt that a good percentage of you are indigos, because this is a model that resonates with indigos if they haven't been thoroughly programmed by peer pressure through the school systems. They'll feel a sense of, that makes more sense than what I'm being taught. They'll respond to these types of models because they resonate with where they come from, with future time. Okay? Let's see. Morphogenetic structure. This all comes down to, we're doing with dimensional scalar waves, frequency bands. We're talking about the templates that matter and consciousness are built upon, that give us the experience of space-time, matter, and physicality. That's what it comes down to, the core of what manifestation takes place on. If we can understand there is a model that shows us how these pieces fit together, we can understand a whole bunch of other things. But if you don't understand multidimensionality, you won't understand any of it. You won't understand indigos, you won't understand yourself, you won't understand what religion was trying to teach you all along, you won't understand what science is trying to find. So it's worth absorbing the model, and it'll grow. This model is just the bare bones, the beginning. There's a lot of technical stuff that I don't even want to deal with. Fortunately, it's not my contract, so I don't have to. I'm here to bring in the functional framework and to bring in the information on what needs to be done fast to make positive changes here. So I'm not going to haggle on details and spend a million years teaching you mathematics from the future and that kind of stuff. We'll get there. Somebody else will do that job. Thank goodness. You could flip that. Okay, now, this is the classic structure. And finally, I've got it all where it's nice in typeset form. Other people have seen this 15-dimensional model in some of the chart packs and things. And we went from having literally rough hand-drawn ones to finally I figured out how to do graphics on the computer, so now I could pull them in decent form. This is a basic model of 15-dimensional structure. This is not how the dimensions relate to each other. They really take place all in the same space. All right, but this is like opening it up to show you the basic structure that you're working with. So it is a model, it's kind of like doing a painting as opposed to taking a photograph. All right, you're not going to go out there in the universe with a spaceship and somewhere find something like this hanging in the air that, there is your structure of how the universe is built. No, it's an intrinsic relationship that's trying to be shown here with these diagrams. We have basically our 5 harmonic universes. When I see HU there, Hue, we're talking harmonic universe for those who don't know that. Harmonic universe 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're each 3-dimensional systems. This is where we get 3-dimensionality from. It's the relationship between angular rotation of particle spin with a 90-degree shift between each dimensional band that allows consciousness to perceive and project outward the illusion of 3-dimensional reality. It is a holographic projection. And for certain reasons that have to do with our gene code, we perceive it as very physical and solid, much more so than it was ever intended to be perceived. And that is because of distortions in our gene code, which tells us that our gene code has something to do with manufacturing the hologram itself, which it does. Our gene code is much more than these little chemicals that science is identifying have something to do with structuring the whole imprint of the body. They're seeing only the surface of DNA. The gene code is much more than observable DNA. In these texts, I talk about DNA, and I talk in ways that scientists kind of look at me and go, what in God's name is she talking about? They think of DNA meaning this, and it's a specific, substance. I know DNA as being something that goes much deeper than that. I use their term DNA because they are using DNA, the substance they've identified, as what they're calling the core blueprint of the human gene code. So I'm using their definition. We'll deal with the core blueprint of the human gene code, and I'll use your term DNA, but it means much more than you're using it right now. When I talk about DNA, I'm going down into the morphogenetic structure again, part of K, part of Chi, part of Cum, and their geometrical relationships to each other within the three-dimensional scale. So again, when I'm using science versus this paradigm, they do meet, but most scientific people don't see that meeting point yet, and they'll try to haggle on, well, DNA means this. You can't use it that way. I can use it any way I want to. First of all, if I want to use that word to show you what you're calling a core blueprint, you're calling that the core blueprint of the human genome, fine. Let's take that concept, and let's take it deeper. You want to know how the core blueprint of the human genome functions? Here it is. It's a 12-strand pattern. And then we lose them because they can't see 12 strands. They've only identified a little tiny bit of what DNA, or the core template, really is. At some point, we'll make a distinction between the whole core template and the manifest DNA, because there is a distinction. What they're calling DNA is really a chemical translation of portions of that core template. So the template is something even deeper. It's a Cathara level. That's what we deal with in Cathara healing, the templates. But for now, when I talk about DNA, I'm referring to the expanded version of that definition as being the core template of the genome. It's important to understand how DNA functions. If, first of all, you want to be able to control your own consciousness. If you don't realize your consciousness and your DNA are intimately intertwined, if you don't realize that if your DNA is not activating properly, you can't bring in higher levels of consciousness because it serves as a block to those frequencies coming in. If you realize DNA is a grouping of scalar points that have certain relationships to each other that need to be active in a certain way to bring other scalar waves that carry your consciousness in, you start to understand the relationship between your body, your mind, and your spirit. And this is a relationship that science to this day refuses to acknowledge because they can't figure out how to prove it. They're walking around in bodies. You'd think they'd be able to at least sense it, but they get so indoctrinated into what they're considering high science here because they don't have anything higher to compare it to, that they get caught up in the mumbo-jumbo jargon to the point where they have no idea how their consciousness relates to their mind or their spirit or their body. Spirit is something that doesn't even exist to most people in the scientific paradigms. And our societies are being led by these people. They're the experts now that tell us how everything works. They're the ones that decide the systems that will be built on how those things work. They don't know how things work. We're having systems built and structures of society set up to serve something that they don't know anything about. And they're putting themselves up as the experts. Science has become our God in this culture. And there's a backlash movement where there's a lot of people saying, forget it, I don't want science at all, and they go totally into religion because they have nowhere else to go with it. This is a medium point where you don't have to buy into heavy religious dogma from twisted, distorted documents that were left. There were good documents once upon a time, but boy, have they been messed with, and a lot of it just by men who were trying to control masses of populations. There's an option. It's learning the structure. It's learning the fact that there was never a separation between consciousness, body, and mind. There always and always will be a unit. But you can convince yourself in your hologram that this isn't true by believing a certain set of ideas that tell you these are separate entities and not intimately intertwined. Science will not show you how your spirit plugs into your mind, plugs into your body, because they don't know. They probably would try to show you, or they'd at least try to bottle it and market it and make a profit if they knew how. Okay? That's what a lot of where science goes now is about. That's a lot of where the paradigms that we're being taught as how things work and what the solutions to problems are, like Ritalin for indigo children. This has more to do with corporations that manufacture that drug, and kickbacks going into programs, nonprofit programs that need funding given to them by people who manufacture Ritalin. This was just found. I saw it was funny. I was getting ready to do the Indigo workshop. 3 o'clock in the morning one morning, the show comes on. I don't even know who broadcast it. It was on like one of those public service channels. Somebody did a documentary recently tracing the corporation that makes Ritalin and its relationship to the ADD Foundation. ADD Foundation is supposed to be a group of people that are helping children, parents of children, with children who have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. All right, one of the things that they endorse is the use of Ritalin as part of their protocol. It's a good thing. It will help the children. They have put together videos of parents. I had this child, and I took him in, and they had, identified him as this. Since the child's been on Ritalin, it's been a wonder. He's just been, so much better since he's had treatment. Like now he's controllable. This kind of thing. What the people in this documentary did, and I didn't have time to write all the things down. This was one of those, Spirit kind of sent it my way just so I'd be able to talk a little bit about it. It wasn't something to focus on in the workshop. But what they had discovered, and it was like, when I heard this, I was like, oh my God, they're really doing it. Talk about one world order nonsense happening here. What the people who made the documentary, and I can try to trace it, at least I think I have written down what the TV station was, what they had found was, first of all, and it's not mentioned in any of the literature, the organization, which I believe is national, maybe international at this point, that I think it's the ADD Foundation or whatever. This is the organization that if you have a child having problems, teacher has a problem with your child goes to a psychologist refers you to a support group, okay? You go to a support group for parents who are trying to deal with children that have been diagnosed with ADD. You get to that support group and they give you literature and they pat you on the back and say, oh, we'll help you. And all these poor parents are just trying to find a way to deal with this child that they don't know what is wrong. What they don't say in their literature, and what they had a very hard time tracking it down to the management levels of who is running this stuff anyway, is the fact that about 80% of their funding, nonprofit organizations, support groups, supposedly grassroots run by parents, 80% of their funding is from the corporation that manufactures Ritalin. That's not mentioned anywhere. Talk about possibly bias, All right. When the people who made this movie confronted the individuals that they traced as management, they did one of those song and dances, like kind of dodge the question, look around. Well, we didn't feel it was necessary to put that on there. Like, don't you think that's a little bit deceptive? Don't you think the parents that are being referred to your group as a support group with no bias should have the right to know that 80% of your funding that you depend on to function is coming from the corporation that manufactures the drug that you just so happen to be saying is wonderful to treat this, when in truth, the treatment level, it hasn't been being done long enough to know any long-term effects. The treatment level is not as high as they tell you it is. These children are being railroaded, and so are the parents. And it's actually criminal the way it's being done, because it's all very quietly done misinformation, or not putting that information in the right places. They went to the corporation that manufactures it. I forget what the name is of it, but there's a corporation that manufactures Ritalin. They wouldn't comment other than issue like one of those statements that you don't talk to anybody, they just send you a little form letter that acknowledge that they do support numerous different types of nonprofit organizations for various reasons. Yeah, so you get them to buy, to endorse using your drugs to treat the problems. So the whole ADD movement is being amplified by this, and if this wasn't bad enough, what was even worse, this is where I got really scared. Like, this is beginning to sound like one of those sci-fi novels where, this one world order starts to take over from underneath and you don't even see it coming. There's a video that's put out by the government, by the educational systems in the government that are studying these things, that has this bunch of parents, just parents that happen to have indigo children, saying how this treatment has worked, and they're endorsing the drug therapy as something that appears to be very good for these children. They're not saying it's the only treatment, but they're saying it appears to be the way to go with these children, of course referring you to support groups, right? What they don't tell you about the video is that I think there were 3 primary parents featured. Each one of them had, at one point in the last 10 years, been one of the heads of the national offices of the ADD Foundation that's taking the funding from the place that, manufactures Ritalin.
referring to Chad.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, I had it all written down someplace, but it wasn't the focus of it. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. What is happening to these children, and what is happening to parents of these children? This is frightening stuff. Now we have government videos. And of course, everybody turns to the government when you don't know what to do and you're just a citizen and you want help. You go to doctors, you go to school systems, you go to government education programs because they're available. And you're being taught that this is the way this is to be handled. The reason you're being taught that comes down to bucks. It's not because they care about your kid, and it's not because they care about you. It's because they care about padding their own pockets. And they also care about making sure the pharmaceutical industry gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Drug therapy is what they would like to see as the thing of forever. It's profitable. It keeps people controllable. It gives medicine, science, and government, as a group that might want to hold hands someday, the ability to literally put you under mind control because you agree to let them. This is a problem that's happening here, and the Indigos are bringing it to the surface. It's starting to, when more and more of these children come out, and more children are being identified as ADD and hyperactive and all of this, there needs to be a point where some of these parents say, and some of them are already saying it, there's something, I just don't feel right about this drug therapy. I just don't feel right about this. I don't care what the experts tell me. And okay, my kid's out of control. You know, I'm trying to figure out what to do with that, but I don't think that's the answer. On this show, interestingly, one more thing I want to say about this show is they had, I believe, 12 children who were on Ritalin, or there was another similar, what was it? No, it wasn't Prozac, Cyclert, I believe it's Cylert, that's it, yeah. They interviewed the children. You know, they were from ages maybe 7 through 18. And they asked them, out of every one of those children, they said, I feel like I'm in space. They said, I don't even feel real anymore. I've told my mother I want to be off it, but she said no. It's like, yeah, it's like, I can think a little more clearly in certain ways. I can focus better. But I'm not even me. This is how these children were answering these things. The children are having their parents say, oh, we love you, we want to fix you. The kids are saying, I feel like I'm in outer space on this stuff. It's doing something bad to me. Please take me off it. And parents are saying, no, I can't do that. I'm trying to help you. You know? So it's a catch-22 all the way around. There has to be another solution. But the solution is going to come, okay, I'll take questions later, okay? The solutions are going to come by understanding, first of all, what in the world we're dealing with indigo children. Because the experts are not going to figure this one out. If you don't understand multidimensional structure, you're not going to understand one iota what an indigo represents. And you're also not going to understand the level of respect they deserve. Because they deserve a level of respect. They deserve to be accommodated here. They're not here by accident. They're here by design, and by plan, and by invitation. And they need your help to remember, once they come into the gene code, just like all of us, bang, the shades go down. And all of a sudden you're here, you don't remember who you were before you came here, and you begin a finite life experience. They need to awaken if they're going to finish what they came here to do. It's up to us, the parents of indigos, the society around indigos, even if you're not parents. We need to be aware that they're coming, aware that they're here, aware that they need our help, to give them the paradigm that they can use to awaken themselves, so they can finish doing what they came to do to help us. Because they came here to help us, but not just us. They came here as part of a very large plan that's going on. And this is something that it's probably going to make a lot of psychologists dealing with indigos not want to hear it at all, because it's going to get into another area that there's many people who haven't made these connections yet. We have some interesting groups of people emerging in our society. We have indigos over here with physical evidence of all these kids being stuck on ADD because they have all these weird characteristics that are associated with uncontrollable behavior. They're indigos. We also have this other really weird group of people over here, you know, the fringes of society, called your alien abductees, okay? People are reporting alien abduction phenomena and all of these things. They seem to be like worlds apart, having nothing to do with each other. Well, the big awakening here is going to be realizing both phenomena are real and both are totally interconnected. This is what we're going to explore as we get into, after we find out who they are, we're going to see where that fits. And why, especially people in psychology, need to start to understand, to wake up, to get out of the mind control, cultural programming, and to realize what's going on around them if they really want to help people. Because again, you have another group of people, contactees, abductees, and a lot of people that are even just channeling are stuffed into this category of, you know, weirdos, okay, fringe of society stuff. You take them to a shrink, okay? And I call shrinks in psychology something different. A shrink is one from the old school. Shrink your mind. They will put you on drugs, and they will put you in institutions if you astral project. If you talk about astral projecting, they'll put you on lithium or something else to make it go away, okay? They are helping you to shrink yourself. So when I refer to shrinks, I'm not being derogatory toward all people in psychology or psychiatry. True psychologists and psychiatrists are helping you to understand and develop your mind, your psyche. Shrinks are helping you to stunt it. And right now, the majority of the people in the psychology movement happen to be shrinks. Why? Because they've been taught to shrink their own minds and perceptions. They've been taught a model. They limit themselves, and they will limit you because they don't know how to do anything different. It needs to be acknowledged, if we want to become functional in dealing with the reality around us, that these fringe groups of people are trying to tell us something. Something is going on here. The abductees are not having sleep apnea problems. They are not having hallucinations. They did not get sexually abused in childhood and transposed it into latent repressed memories of having aliens mess with them. 99% of the cases are not having these problems. You may find one or two that picked up the theme from the TV and said, okay, let's do, transfer it into that. But most people claiming contact with visitors of some sort are having contact with visitors. And this has everything to do with the indigo children. I don't know if mainstream psychology is anywhere near ready to understand who indigos are, because they're not just human children with special characteristics. Indigo children are hybrid children. We are in the middle of a race expansion.